All right. When you think of the Portuguese getting to India, one name pops into your head, right? Vasco da Gama. But here's the thing. His famous trip in 1498, that wasn't really the start of the story. It was more like the end of the first chapter. Today, we're going to blow past that single voyage. We're going to dig into the secret blueprint, this incredibly detailed plan from 1505 that actually laid the foundation for a massive global empire.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we're going to bust a big myth you've probably heard about Da Gama's guide. Then we'll zoom way out to see the century of work that even made his trip possible. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the actual plan to build the state of India. We'll meet the guy in charge, see what this wild new kind of empire actually looked like, and then wrap up with its incredible, and I mean incredible, 500-year legacy.
Okay, let's kick things off with a story that you see all over the internet. It's this idea that Vasco da Gama was just kind of lost at sea until this legendary Arab navigator came along and, poof, single-handedly pointed the way to India.
So who was this mystery guide? And more importantly, is any of this even true?
Right, so the name that always comes up is Ahmad Ibn Majid. He gets framed as the true navigator, the one who rescued a lost Vasco da Gama. And you can see why it's a popular story, right? This idea that the mighty Portuguese were just completely clueless without his help. It's a really compelling narrative, and boy, has it spread like wildfire online. But, and this is a big but, almost as fast as that story gets posted, you see people jumping in to correct it. This comment here just gets straight to the point. The truth is, there's just no historical evidence to suggest that Ibn Majid and da Gama ever even crossed paths, let alone sailed together.
Okay, so what really happened? Well, the key thing to remember is that the Portuguese absolutely did use local knowledge. I mean, they'd be crazy not to. In what's now Kenya, Da Gama hired a local pilot, someone who really knew the monsoon winds for that final leg of the journey across the Indian Ocean. But the whole idea of one single mastermind guiding the entire expedition, that's the myth. And it completely misses the real story, which is actually way more fascinating.
And yeah, that real story is, wow. It's just so much bigger, so much more impressive. This wasn't about one guy or a single lucky break. No way. This was a systematic, state-funded project that took generations to pull off.
Get this. For more than 80 years before Da Gama even left port, Portuguese sailors were meticulously, painstakingly inching their way down the coast of Africa. This wasn't just some adventure, exploration for the fun of it. This was a calculated, methodical, long-term investment by the crown.
And this timeline just lays it out perfectly. You can see how each trip built on the one before it. I mean, rounding Cape Bojador back in 1434, that was a huge psychological win. Then exploring the Gulf of Guinea, that secured trade. And here's the kicker. A full 10 years before Da Gama, Bartolomeu Dias had already proven you could sail around the tip of Africa. So Vasco da Gama's famous voyage, it was really the final, triumphant victory lap of a marathon that had been going on for almost 100 years.
Okay, so they made it to India. Great, but getting there is one thing. Controlling the insane amount of wealth there, that's a whole different ballgame. The Portuguese figured out pretty fast that just showing up and trying to trade nicely, that wasn't going to work. They had to switch gears big time, from exploration to straight-up domination. So, let's talk about the problem they were trying to solve. For centuries, if you wanted spices in Europe, the trade was locked down by a Venetian and Muslim monopoly, and because of that, stuff like pepper was literally worth its weight in gold. The Portuguese solution was, well, it was radical. Their plan? Create a direct sea route, cut out every single middleman, and just grab the profits right from the source. And the potential profits were just astronomical. We're talking about the pepper from Da Gama's first trip alone, paying for the entire expedition 60 times over. Just let that sink in. But to keep that kind of money flowing year after year, they couldn't just be traders. No, they had to become the bouncers, the gatekeepers of the entire Indian Ocean. And that's what led to the creation of something totally new, the Estado Português da Índia, or the Portuguese State of India. Now, this wasn't an empire like you're probably picturing, a big chunk of land on a map. No, it was a regi maritima, a maritime network. The best way to think about it is less like a solid country and more like a giant spider's web, with these super strategic fortresses and powerful fleets controlling all the important sea lanes.
All right, so you've got this radical new idea for an empire, but you need someone to actually build it, right? An architect on the ground to make it real?
And that's where our story takes a turn, with a secret plan and a guy named Francisco de Almeida.
So fast forward to 1505. It's been 7 years since da Gama first landed. The King of Portugal picks this guy, Francisco de Almeida, to be the first ever Viceroy of India. And his job wasn't just to go trade for spices. Oh no. He was sent with a very detailed, very secret set of instructions. His mission? Build this new maritime empire from scratch.
And these instructions, they were called the regimento, were basically the literal blueprint for building an empire. It was a step-by-step guide. Step 1, lock down the African coast. Build forts there to control the gold trade. Step 2, dominate the Indian coast. Build more forts to monopolize the spice trade. Step 3, go to war. Attack and seize any rival trading ships you see. And finally, Step 4, park a huge permanent naval fleet in the Indian Ocean to make sure everyone follows the new rules. Let's be clear, this wasn't a business plan. It was a battle plan.
In Almeida, he got to work immediately and with ruthless efficiency. I mean, just look at this timeline. He sails from Lisbon in March. By July, he's already building the first fort in Africa. A month later, in August, he's sacking entire cities. By October, he's building fortresses in India and officially takes the title of Viceroy. Think about that. In a little over 7 months, that blueprint, that piece of paper, became a hard reality of stone forts and cannons all across the Indian Ocean.
So, what did this new thing, this Estado da India, actually look like in practice? Well, it was a lot more than just a handful of military forts. Its capital city, which eventually became Goa, got so rich and powerful that people back in Europe started calling it the Rome of the East. I mean, that nickname alone tells you everything you need to know about how people saw its power and importance. And this wasn't some makeshift operation. It was run by a really complex, sophisticated government. You had the viceroy at the very top, of course, then a whole treasury department, the Vidroia, the Fazenda, to handle all that cash, a high court, the relation for the justice system. You had military captains running each individual fort, and even town halls or cameras for local administration in the cities. This was a complete, functioning state doing its thing thousands and thousands of miles away from Portugal.
So this state that Almeida put together back in 1505, it wasn't just some flash in the pan, not even close. It ended up casting an incredibly long shadow over the course of world history. Just think about this one year, 1961. 1961. That's when the Indian Army finally annexed the last Portuguese territories, like Goa. So the Estado de India, the state that was born from that 1505 blueprint, lasted for almost 450 years. That is just an astonishingly long time.
When you look at the big picture, that 1505 mission was a massive turning point in history. It created one of the world's very first global maritime empires. It completely shifted the center of economic gravity from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. It left a cultural, religious, and legal footprint in Asia that you can still see today. And, for better or for worse, it basically wrote the playbook for all the European colonial empires that came after it. And all this leaves us with one final big question to chew on. This empire was born from a really specific, aggressive plan, all about controlling the sea with forts. So how did that original DNA, that focus on the sea, not on land, end up shaping the very last chapter of its incredibly long story? It's just a great reminder that so often the way things begin has a huge say in how they finally end.